You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Holt.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Shoe and Show fans, all 10 of you. We are so excited that you're listening. Andy.
Your mom's listening, so there's 11.
There you go. That's right. Actually, my mom doesn't listen, just my dad does.
Oh, really?
Jasmine, how are you?
Good. And we have more than 10 fans.
That's true.
I've seen a lot of people while we're in Portland, Oregon, and they've all said they love the podcast.
That's true. You got to undersell yourself so people are pleasantly surprised, right? Andy, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. I'm super inspired, perspired.
He's dead.
I'm super exhausted. We've been doing a lot of events lately, and it's all been super positive, but there's so much happening in our industry, and it's a lot to take in. And we have a great perch because we get to see all these different things happening in different departments, but it also is a burden because your brain has to process it, right?
Yeah, so it is burdensome.
I'm super excited about where we are as an industry and where we're headed. And I'm really passionate lately about all the business changes and what people are working on and collaborating together.
Right.
So.
No, it feels like a renaissance era, I think, for footwear.
For sure.
And to help us kind of dive into the Renaissance era, I want to bring on a dear friend of mine. One of the cool things about our industry, there are 350,000 workers in the U.S. footwear industry here in the U.S., but you make these relationships and you build them over time. It's really a relational industry. And so Dan LeBlanc, who's Global Customs Manager at Nike, is one of those guys that we have a lot of interaction, and he comes to a lot of our events, and is a dear friend. And so, Dan, we can't thank you enough for coming on Shoe and Show. We had to kind of, we had to come to your town for it to happen, but here we are. And
we're chase you down with a stick.
Exactly. We're so happy you're here. Welcome to Shoe and Show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invite, Matt and Andy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. So we've talked about this for quite some time. You just passed 30 years at Nike.
That's correct.
Congratulations.
And that is awesome.
Thank you.
That is so cool. So how on earth, you're a Minnesota guy, how on earth did you land at Nike? And
Shoe story.
Yeah, tell us your shoe story.
Wow. Okay. Way back when.
Gather around, kids.
Gather around. I'll try and make a long story short. So I moved out to Portland, Oregon from Minnesota based on I have an aunt and uncle live out here, and they kept bugging me to come out. So one day I packed my bags. I did not want to farm. I'm not a farmer. So I drove out here. And I landed a job. I worked in the home health industry selling medical supplies for a couple years. And the companies went broke. It was kind of a hard time for that industry. So way back then, 30-some years ago, you can go door to door and apply for jobs. You can actually go into the building and look at their bulletin boards, what's new, what are the job opportunities and so forth. So there's like 6 companies I kept the search for. And I applied for Nike, and next thing you know, I got a call, interview, got hired.
That's awesome.
So the first job I worked in was accounting for apparel. Then I worked in distribution in the finance and allocations area. And then I went from there into product creation, which I worked in that area for 17 years between costing and footwear development, which are great stories behind that. I don't know if you guys want to hear any stories.
Always. Stories are always key to the success of this podcast.
So in the development world, one of my most memorable moments was I developed a shoe for Lance Armstrong.
Wow.
The one he won the number 7 Tour de France.
Interesting.
I know.
It's not the shoes.
It's like, so it's such a cool story where, Mark Smith was a designer and I was a developer, and he worked with Lance and so forth. So we developed a shoe that he was going to wear on the podium when he won the Tour de France number 7. So we had it all planned that he was going to win it. So we had all these numerous icons on the sock liners and all that to represent who Lance is and who he is and so forth. Well, anyway, wouldn't you know it, I'm in Asia wrapping up the shoe, send it to him when he's in Paris, or will be there soon to win the race. So the shoes are ready for him at the hotel to pick up. And he wins it, and he actually wears them, which is good.
Yeah.
And it's so funny where, I was flying back from Asia, and I was like, I know he won the race, but did he wear the shoes?
Right.
Because I couldn't see anything. That's years ago. Didn't have the iPhone back then and so forth. Anyway, I get to work on Monday, and the marketing person goes, and I go, hey, what happened? Oh, he goes, you wouldn't believe it. I go, oh, no, the shoes fall apart. You start thinking about all these things, right? He goes, yeah, he was getting ready to go on stage, and he bends over, and he does something to the shoes. And I go, oh, well, what happened? He goes, his daughter stepped on him, and he was so proud of the shoes that he wiped off the dirt so they were all nice and clean when he got on the stage.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool.
I was like, wow, okay.
So it was his daughter's fault, not yours.
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh. So anyway, a couple months later, Sheryl Crow.
Yeah.
So happened at a concert in Portland. VIP, so the people that worked on the Lance products got to attend. And so
That's awesome.
That's cool.
That was fun.
Yeah.
I bet that was fun.
So that's one
Did
of
you
my
make shoes for her to wear on stage?
No. That would have been good though.
That would have been good.
So I went from product creation, and years go by, and our global customs group, we're looking for someone to integrate customs more into the product engines, basically to optimize duties on the product design, construction, and maybe where it's sourced. So that's how I ended up in the global trade and customs world.
Right.
So I work a lot with the business, the categories, kind of what's up, what are the challenges, are they educated on the duty implications?
Right.
Especially on the U.S. side, which is the most complex. How many duty rates?
436 classifications.
436 classifications.
Yep.
Which is a lot. So we try to whittle that down and kind of apply to what products they're working on to get to hopefully optimize the duties. We provide the information, and they take that and they run with it, whatever they want to do. As long as everybody's connected, what the results are going to be.
Now, we always talk about this disconnect between the design side of a business and then the customs compliance, the costing, all that.
Yep.
Often you're kind of the buzzkill, right? That position is a buzzkill because the designer has this really cool thing they want to do. They might want to add a protective feature or something that drives the duty up to 37.5% or even more. And that might not be able to be commercialized. How many of those kind of conversations do you have internally?
We have quite a few, actually, because what we do as well, we have the U.S., right? How do we make a shoe leather duty with the various components, and how do we align that with EU? Because they have different rules.
Right.
A little bit different than the U.S.
And you're a global brand.
And we're a global brand, so we try to get the two, if the shoe is being designed globally. Sometimes there is one-offs where a country specific. But we try to make sure if they're using leather, hit leather duty for both, and what is that configuration? What do they need to do? What do they need to adjust on the pattern? And go from there. If the store is leather, usually it's not too much of a buzz killer, but it can be.
Yeah.
If they have to tweak something, that changes the visual of that shoe. So we try to minimize that. And sometimes it works where maybe you can go underneath the underlay or overlay to make it work for Europe, for example.
Yeah.
Are those conversations, I mean, we always talk about how important it is to have it at the design process, so you're not getting through the development side where you're almost at production and then all of a sudden you're having those conversations. How good are you guys at trying to do it with, I know you guys have specifically tried to help educate designers. You build out programs and training to give them more information to get them thinking more about that, right?
And we do a lot with the developers.
Yeah.
Because they're getting the handoff. They're bringing the shoe to life, basically from design to manufacturing. So it's extremely important that they know the parts, the story. We always go about what is the story of the shoe, no matter which function. It seems like you're at Nike, you always kind of want to know the story.
Are there videos with that? Commercial videos that you guys play every step of the way?
There probably is somewhere. So as long as they're engaged, and we set up, we call Customs 101, training with developers. Design usually attends, materials, costing folks. We try to do it as a group. A lot of times it's by categories as well, and educate that group.
How often do you do that? That's really smart.
We do it, it goes in streaks. We do it, I'd say, overall between the categories and materials and costing 3-4 times a year.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, since I've taken this role, the business has actually become more educated. They have enough information to run with it, But then when they have this kind of gut feeling, I'm not really sure, is when they call us.
Help desk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, kind of, and then, at any opportunity we get, we'll come over here and help you and provide more training and so forth.
Right.
Awesome.
Well, I mean, in your job, what's really cool about your job is that you get line of sight as to what's coming out and what's being developed. And for a company like Nike, it's so iconic. It has so much innovation. There's so many cool things going on. How often are you like really stoked about something you're working on that the public hasn't seen yet, but it's going to be coming, it's going to be really hot? Is that you get to peek behind the curtain, man? It's really, really a cool job.
It is. That's great, actually. So there's certain things that I cannot go behind the curtain.
Right.
A lot of things I can.
Yeah.
And it's always exciting to see what's new. And, I'm always interested, too, in the color stories as well. Mm-hmm. What is that color? What is that brightness? Is it, more pinks, orange, or whatever it is for the upcoming seasons?
What about throughout your career? I mean, obviously you've been at Nike for a long time. Tell us a little bit about the changes that have taken place as Nike's trajectory has skyrocketed over the last, couple of decades. What is that internally like? I mean, I'm sure, you guys have constantly building, but a new campus, expansion. What was it like 30 years ago, and what is it like today? What are the differences that you guys see in the internal business?
Well, for me personally, I could pick up the phone and get a hold of somebody. Now it's, email, make sure you have the cell phone and number and so forth. But it is such in today's world as compared to the past. I mean, the past was networking,
right.
Who do you know type thing.
Right.
Today's world, you got to really connect.
Right.
You got to know kind of what that party does. Maybe not so much the granular details sometimes, but kind of like, what do you do? Or if you're not sure or whatever that questioner's problem is, who can I connect to get that right solution? Keep you on that path till you get the answer you're looking for.
But I'm sure it's complex because there's so many people at Nike.
Well, that's why. And there's, I don't want to say there's walls, but you got to kind of know how to maneuver around and who to get a hold of. And it's not easy. In the customs world that I work in, we got the product. Materials is a big thorn in our side with all the latest innovation on materials. What does that make up? Who do you call as far as what is, what's the intended material and how is it made? And so forth.
And how will the government perceive that material once it's in form of an upper?
That is correct.
Yep.
You go from a raw material to the classification, Chapter 64. Is it still the same material called as a raw material? For example.
Do you have a boo? Anytime we say Chapter 64, you could have like a boo.
Yeah. Boo-hoo.
Oh, gone out, I guess.
And another thing I have not mentioned, so I do a lot of different varieties in our role here, and I work with labels.
Yeah.
Footwear material content labels, which is a fun adventure as well, as far as understanding what's required for the various import countries.
Yeah.
Again, we're global. All these countries have different regulations on what's required for material content labeling. So I work with that. I drive that from our global perspective.
So complex. We bet out a label matrix last year or earlier this year, and it's just trying to keep up to speed as to how each country perceives what labeling looks like for footwear is really hard to do.
Also, just translation.
Yeah.
Translation.
I mean, you got to read Russian law and then
Right.
make sense of that, right?
Right.
I mean, that's.
I don't do that, but I hand it to them. You tell me. No.
He navigates and finds the correct person
I'm
in the
not that
complex matrix.
I'm not that talented, but thanks, Andy. No.
Which people, Dan, that begs the question, because talking about the complex matrix and find the right people, which people are trying to find you within Nike?
Materials right now, from yesterday, materials, the sustainability group.
Yeah.
That's to add a little bit to that. That's something I'm working on with our regulatory groups, legal groups, sustainability groups, moving. I don't want to use the word waste, but moving recycled materials across borders. And they've been reaching out to us as far as what are the regulations, what are the requirements, what can we do and not do. You get pushback from China. China doesn't want to take waste. How do you work around that? Vietnam, what are their regulations? Just kind of going through that gamut right now.
That's really interesting because if you would somehow collect shoes here to recycle and then send them to the factory, if China's not accepting waste, then you have to negotiate or work with them to say it's not waste. We're actually using it but there's there's just this barrier that you have to
and they've
break
been taking
down.
on trash for so many years that they're
done. And
done.
They're taking on more trash from the White House.
But how that's a good one. But how do you, kind of we're working, how do you kind of maneuver and get around that to make it's a good thing, and how do you bring that good thing into a different place for production?
Yeah. How do you see, we're having a lot of conversations constantly about innovation and changes, when you look at stuff like 3D printing and localized stuff, I mean, you still have to, focus on material qualities and, as you look from your past and you forecast in the future, how are these jobs just changing, and how are our processes changing? I mean, obviously Nike's at the forefront when you look at the Flyknit and that whole revolution of design to manufacturing. What are the kind of the keys that you see coming forward that are really interesting in terms of development?
What's kind of funny, you mentioned that. It seems like we're always in a cycle.
Yeah.
Way back, a lot of leather, synthetics. Then, you kind of move along a little bit, and then Flyknit.
Yep.
So textile goes up, and then some of the synthetics, you get more films. For classification, you want to make sure you get synthetic duties on certain things based on certain requirements to get a lower duty. And then all of a sudden, you get into this whole fashion world more, and it seems like leather kind of comes back a little bit more in certain areas. You get some more of I want that soft leather again. I mean, It kind of...
There are cycles to it.
There's a little bit of cycles. The volumes, keeps going up, I think, in the textile world a little bit. But you kind of see that. You see those trends go up and down.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at import volume from 2012 on. 6404 is taking off like crazy because we are a knit upper footwear society. That's where we are. That's where, because that seems to be the easier part to innovate and to automate, right? Because those are the things that you can take the labor component out, at least minimize it more. And so that's why we've had this huge reliance on knit up. And Flyknit was a game changer. It really has been, and that's what you guys do really well. And so I'm trying to get in your brain, Dan. What are you looking at right now that the rest of the world doesn't know that's coming? Because that's where I think people don't have an appreciation for all that goes into a launch, all that goes into a new product launch from the regulatory side, from the classification side. There's so much goes into it.
So the basic from you start. See if I can answer your question, Matt. So there's so much going on. Is first of all, you figure out what's the material story,
right?
And what if you're working materials groups, what are the duties implications on that material to bring it into the product? What are the expectations? What are obviously there's your performance in the materials, but then what is the cost, and how does it affect duties sometimes based on where you're going with your construction features of the shoe? And we get involved with that on and off. Usually more on than off. Depends, it depends what group you're working with. But then you kind of go through all that, bringing that part of that shoe from design, the materials, and you work with all the costing, and you work with, can we make it?
Right.
From a manufacturing perspective. And then you go from the manufacturing into the commercialization world, and then you bring it to life onto the shelf.
Yeah.
In a nutshell.
Yeah.
And we play parts of that as it goes through the product creation cycle.
Right. That makes sense. So I'm going to pull an audible. We talked about doing a fashion footwear and focus segment, but Dan's got some really cool kicks on. So I want to do. Oh man! I think we do both. I think we do unprecedented. We do both Whatcha Got, Whatcha Gettin, and the fashion footwear and focus. Are you guys with me on this?
Can we do
that?
Jasmine looks unsure.
No,
Andy's questioning.
I'm fine.
All right. So
let's go for it.
Whatcha Got, Whatcha Gettin? Because I want to hear what Dan's got. So Dan, how this works is that we reveal what we got on, and we talk about what we're going to get next. And so that's. So I'll go first. So I finally picked up some Fear of God shoes. Well, I had to go to StockX because they're hard to get, but I got some Fear of God Nike collaborations.
And they look awesome.
They're awesome. I wore them last night at Bruising Shoes. I know that's not evergreen, Blake, but I wore them last night at Bruising Shoes, and they're sweet. And so that's what I have on.
Do they humble you?
Your fear of God? Did
they humbled my bank account. I'll tell you that. And it made me question, Lord, am I being too much of a consumer by buying these expensive shoes? So I did have some inner turmoil on it, Andy. What I'm going to get is, let's see, what do I want to get? When we were raffling off product last night, just getting back to Jordan 11s, those are classics. I've never owned them. They're just a sweet silhouette, and maybe I'll pick up some Jordan 11 retros. So that's how it works. Andy?
Jasmine, you're next.
Jasmine, you're up.
I have a pair of black and white Cortez sneakers on, and I don't know what I want next. I've been thinking about that. Steve Madden has some really cute sandals on sale right now at Macy's, so I might head over there.
Yeah, you got to get them before the duty takes effect. So
yeah. And
Buzz, where's that boo?
I can stock up before next month.
Yeah, stock it up. So Andy,
I'm gonna skip.
Andy's skipping. All right, Andy's skipping. Dan, what do you got on?
Okay, I have the recent release, the Joyrides,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
which it's a new technology Nike just came out with. It's what it is. It's beads
Yep.
providing the cushioning.
That's interesting.
So it was two reasons. One is to provide kind of a conformity to your foot. So you got beads. Eventually, they're going to kind of conform to your foot. And the other thing was to provide more cushioning. There's air between the beads, and as you run and so forth, the air gets released, so it enhances your actually foot protection to increase your cushioning.
Are those at the employee store right now?
Limited size is like 14 and 9s.
Oh,
I had to go to
dagger.
Nike.com and get them.
Oh, dagger.
I actually just met the person who does your retail experiences, and she was saying that the store would be focused around those shoes, and kind of was explaining how there would be kind of like beads everywhere within the retail to like kind of create the experience around the shoes.
That's cool.
So that's cool.
So this is kind of an odd story. I couldn't sleep the other night.
Yeah.
People when they can't sleep, they count sheep.
Yeah.
Well, I had an extra pair of shoes. So what I did, I took my knife out and I cut open the beads out of the
my goodness.
Is this a dream, or you really did this?
Honest to God, I did. So I started counting. 1 a beady, 2 beady, and so forth, right?
Crazy.
So how many?
You're too deep in the job, brother.
That's what I do, Andy. That's what I do.
I do think there could be a collaboration between fear of God and your beads to make a rosary shoe for the Catholics.
There you go. I love it.
Yeah.
So here's a trivia question.
That's not a joke. That's for the Pope.
So how many beads do you think there are in a pair of shoes?
In a pair of the Joyrides?
Yeah, let's say a men's 10. You're going to take a wild guess.
300. I don't even know what size the beads are.
I have no idea what's happening.
Man, maybe.
Can you see the beads in there?
They're small.
1,000.
No, it's like 10 million.
10 million? Oh, you're close. Okay.
No, they're all
on, Jasmine.
off. I don't know, maybe like
100,000.
100. I wouldn't say anything
million.
that high.
So there's 22,000.
Fake news, 10 million.
Is that a joke?
And
22,000?
And you know what? I learned something from all this, right? Besides, I
Wait,
actually
did you count them all in one?
But I actually did get to sleep, in case you're wondering.
At what number?
That was my next
what number?
I learned something. After I was done counting, I ripped a pair. I was like, I could have just ripped one each and took it times 2.
Oh my gosh.
That's what happens when you're not here.
Hilarious.
Anyway, so I had to throw a little humor in there.
No, I love it. I love it. So, all right, next up, fashion footwear. Let's double down. Fashion footwear focus.
So I don't know if everybody watches Stranger Things on Netflix, but Nike has like a new collaboration with Stranger Things.
Yes.
It's like a lot of different styles. I was trying to think back of like, when did the movie collaborations become so popular? Like we've always had the celebrities and the influencers, but like movies, I don't know, I think it's just new. I remember seeing them like collaborating with Marvel before, but before that I can't remember like what other movies like shoe brands have collaborated with. And I was trying to think like, what is my favorite movie and what I want a shoe designed around it?
That's a really good question, Jasmine. I think a couple things come to mind. One, the iconic Back to the Future 2 with the Nike shoe that led to the actual production of the Hyper Adapt. But you got to think we're like in nostalgia mode right now. And sneakers were 40, 50 years old. Like what we're dealing with now. So if you're reaching back into the 80s, like a Stranger Things has done
Yeah.
ad nauseum,
Right.
they're going to be referencing things that make us feel nostalgic. So the Cortez or whatever the shoe was at the time. But
Right.
those are all hot items right now. We love nostalgia. So I would think you're going to see more and more of it as we go
Yeah.
forward.
Remember when we did the Lego
Yep.
shoe where you had the vamp cover was kind of a part, looked like a Lego?
Yeah, they actually at Pencil they make little shoes out of the whole Lego.
Lego?
Oh yeah, it's cool.
That's cool. That's cool. What other? Have you seen something come in for like the next Marvel movie that you've had to classify?
Can't tell you.
You can't tell me.
Get the drill.
Oh man, bean counter. You put a new meaning for bean counter.
I know. It's like, oh my God.
Well, Dan, I can't thank you enough for coming on Shoe In. You've obviously are an integral part of our success as an organization. Thank you for all you do for us, and thanks for sharing your stories. A lot of people love Nike and want to get the inside story on some stuff, and you've brought that today. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you, Dan.
Okay. Thanks.
Folks, this is Shoe and Show. We're covering all things of the footwear industry, specifically on the business side. We want to hear from you. So if you have ideas of show topics we should cover or guests we should have on, please let us know. You can go to shoeandshow.com, drop us a line. You can also find our complete catalog there. We appreciate you guys listening. And until next time, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.